And, something that I find kind of, I don't know, just, I guess, dumbfounding is, when Manchin was willing to essentially just shut it down, I think he delayed the final passage of the 1.9 trillion stimulus by at least a day or two. And frankly, I think the perception that was, that Biden and the Democrats were trying to put forth, that this was somehow like the New Deal. We saw corporate media people framing this as rewriting the social safety net, which, to me, again, we live in this better than nothing dynamic, but it is not. It is not what is needed considering the proportion of the crisis. But what I found kind of dumbfounding is, I think the importance of politics and movements is understanding when you have a moment, because they don't come so often. I think you understand the need to capitalize off a moment. And in this moment, which is not just a public health crisis, but a economic crisis, a spiritual crisis, so many people struggling emotionally, with so many people that just feel kind of up the river without a paddle. You had a moment to actually do more than move the Overton window, but to actually put the pressure on the corporatists that have been depriving you of this relief. And it seems to me that, again, I'm just pointing at the squad because they are the people that would be fighting on our behalf in Congress. It seems to me like they're almost afraid because they think that the public overall would not be in support if they fought. But to me, I think the polls and just common sense indicates if they would have met Joe Manchin with, well, we're going to shut it down if it's not in there, I think the public would have overwhelmingly supported that.
Oh, I mean, look at the polls on $15 an hour on Medicare for all, and also the idea of creating a massive jobs program. These are hugely popular. I mean, let's be clear. The stimulus package that has been passed by the US Congress and the Biden administration, it is important. It is going to make a real difference in people's lives in this urgent moment. But we should also be clear, that is not some sort of beneficence on the part of the Democratic establishment. Ultimately, what this stimulus package indicates is their own need to save their own system, which is a complete crisis right now. It is not only the pandemic, there is a long-term crisis in the capitalist system. And you can see this happening worldwide. It's not just the Biden administration. In country after country under capitalism, we're seeing governments pass the kind of stimulus that you haven't seen in the neoliberal era. So there's definitely a real shift there. But the whole debacle on $15 an hour also shows what the real problem is and where the disagreements are. And as you said, it's important to take advantage of that moment. I mean, let's make note of the fact that it wasn't Manchin who took out the $15 an hour from the Senate bill. It was Schumer and Biden. I mean, so in other words, it was the Democrats who had made promises on $15 an hour. Let's not forget, Biden made a promise on $15 an hour, and they themselves took it out of the Senate bill. It wasn't Manchin, and much less it wasn't the Republicans who had to do that. So in other words, what they are doing themselves is bending to the interests of corporate, the corporate wing of their party, and they are themselves the corporate wing, because it's not like Biden couldn't bring the senators in line because he's some sort of shrinking violet. No, I mean, a lot of people said, oh, the senators from Delaware themselves, voted against that. So why couldn't you bring them in line? That Biden somehow doesn't have guts. No, Biden has guts. He is fighting for his side, which is Wall Street interests. And unfortunately, the passage of the stimulus also indicates their own desire to save their own system. So we have to be very clear which side they are on. And that's why it was important that there was this debate before the stimulus and the $15 vote. There was the debate that came to be known as Force the Vote, where a section of the left was saying, let's make sure that we use this opportunity, rather than voting for Nancy Pelosi and giving her, just like a blank check, a rubber stamping of her position as speaker, that the squad should use that moment to force a vote on Medicare for all. And at that time, AOC and other squad members said, well, that's not good strategy. Let's focus on a winning strategy, something like $15 an hour. But then we came to $15 an hour and they did the same thing. So I think it's important to point out that the disagreements are not about this or that tactic. I mean, those disagreements are valid. And in any serious left movements, we will have to have serious discussions and honest debates. And sometimes we will disagree. But I think that what's really underlying what happened with the force the vote and what happened with $15 an hour and the stimulus bill is a refusal to have a head-on conflict with the Democratic establishment, with their own party. And one, it shows how that strategy doesn't work, and why Seattle won is because we had a socialist strategy, a fighting strategy. And secondly, it also shows how it is like beating your head against a brick wall to be part of a party that represents interests that are diametrically opposed to the interests of working people. The Democratic establishment, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, all of them represent Wall Street interests. They have some differences with the previous Trump regime, and it's really, really important that the majority of Americans sent a repudiation message to Trump by defeating him in the election. But at the end of the day, one thing that the Democratic establishment and the Republican Party both have in common is that they both serve Wall Street interests. And so it's not working for us, for working people, to continue to put our forces inside the Democratic Party. This also brings up the question of a new party. But regardless of which whether you're in the Democratic Party or you're independent like me, you're not going to win victories without a fighting strategy. So in other words, what we were saying was, not only should you use your to the squad numerical balance of power to withhold the vote on this must-pass stimulus bill and insist that $15 an hour is made part of it, fight to the mat like Joe Manchin does, and but not stop at that. It is not just about antics on the congressional floor. This is about a serious strategy for the left. So what we were arguing for is for that strategy to be used alongside the squad making a call for hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, to come out and march on the streets in West Virginia, in Arizona, in Georgia. And these are key states because West Virginia and Arizona are states where Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are senators from. But Georgia is important because the Black working class vote was mobilized by Biden saying, just vote for us, we've got your back. Well, the Democratic Party establishment has not got your back. If you are a Black worker, or if you are one of the tens of millions of Americans who is suffering during a pandemic at the same time that the billionaire class in America has gotten over $1 trillion richer. So this really does bring up serious questions of strategy, and we have to grapple with them.
And as a reminder, folks, we've got almost 400 live, so smash the like button. It's right under the video. More people that press like, the more people that will see this. I wanted to ask you also, because to me, I think you said something in a different interview that really spoke to me. I think a lot of the naysayers, whether it be to force the vote, whether it be to, trying to block the stimulus bill in demanding that the minimum wage be put in there, I think a lot of people wrongly have said you shouldn't bother doing it if it's not going to work right away. And among some who, claim to be progressive, the measuring stick has been victory or tangible results now. Let's not try anything if it's not certain to be victorious. But my reading of history, and I know movement history very well, is that's not how movements work. And that's not how any successful movement has worked. In fact, for long-term success, you need to have defeats as kind of those building blocks. I mean, none of us have 100 years to keep on losing, but you need to have some defeats just to kind of get the public consciousness raised on these issues. And, for example, with this minimum wage battle, it's unlikely if these 7 or 8 House members coalesce together as a bloc to stop it. They probably would have folded at some point, because I think it's very clear through President Biden signaling before the quote parliamentarians decision, which was a lot of BS, that they were not going to move heaven and earth for $15 minimum wage. However, if they would have fought, maybe you don't win it right this minute, but it helps galvanize the movement, galvanize organizers, galvanize just normal Americans behind you. It helps raise the public consciousness to exactly what you said. Well, wait a minute here. This is the only campaign promise you made, a $15 minimum wage. You're the president. You got all houses. So actually there's some pressure put on these politicians, and it sets up the infrastructure, in my opinion, to win the next try or the next try. So what do you have to say to these people that they seem to say you shouldn't bother if it's not guaranteed to win right now on this try?
I think the first thing to note is that we are guaranteed to lose and lose and lose if we don't have a fighting strategy. This is what we have seen. And as you said correctly, the one promise Biden made was $15 an hour, and he betrayed working people on that promise. So if victory is the yardstick, then look at Seattle's example. Look at the example of a socialist fighting office where we have won victory after victory. And as I said before, victories that were thought of as impossible, but we made them happen precisely because we were willing to look at this as this is what we should be looking at nationally as well, which is that this is a system of capitalism where the forces of the wealthy are not in alignment with the interests of working people, and trying to get them in alignment with the interests of working people is like trying to square a circle. It is never going to happen. It is an impossibility. In other words, what we are guaranteed to do is to not win victories for working people if we continue on this path of not trying to have conflict with the establishment. And I think that even when genuine people, I mean, this is not a question of intention. It's a question of, looking past what fears people may have unconsciously. When people say that we should not do it unless we are guaranteed to win, what they're really worried about is not whether they will win that first time or not. What they're worried about is that there are powerful enemies that are going to be absolutely furious with you if you have the temerity to fight. And my response to that is yes, absolutely, yes. What did Frederick Douglass say? Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.